The following programming is sponsored by Marc J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group. Entrepreneur, founder, author, and financial advisor Marc Bernstein helps high-performing business owners turn their visions into reality. Through his innovative work and the Forward Focus Forums, Marc connects entrepreneurs to resources that fuel their success. Founders Forum is a radio show and podcast where entrepreneurs share their journeys, revealing the lessons they've learned and the stories behind their success. Join Marc and his guests for a mix of inspiration, valuable insights, and a little fun. Now, let's dive in.
Good morning, America. How are you? We're back on Founders Forum, and we have two guests that we've had on already. I may as well introduce them at the beginning. I don't usually do that, but we have Sari Greene, who is the founder of her former company, Sage Data
Security,
and she's entrepreneur, author, educator, investor, community activist, serves on many boards. You've heard her story. And we have Jason Sfire, who I didn't give his whole introduction before, so I will now. He's president and owner and founder of multiple family-owned businesses under the umbrella of Fidelity Group Limited. He's had a 33-year career in a family-owned business. He's in suburban Chicago in the real estate development business. Since he was 16 years old, he's had virtually every possible role that you can have in the family companies. His initial offering to the company was to run the construction arm. He was already running his own construction business, and that was called Fidelity Construction Company. And in his years of running the construction arm of the business, he's completed hundreds of projects, from one-room remodels to 450,000 square foot shopping centers. Should help Babcock Ranch out there.
No, I think I'm good.
You're good.
I'm in Florida to relax, buddy.
Yeah, I understand. From the ground up, it's been an incredible journey that now has him leading all 18 companies and managing families. Like, you need something else to do, right?
Right.
It's very nice of me. It's a 1.8 million square foot real estate portfolio, and he's president and COO today. He also, in his free time, is board of 3 nonprofit boards, and a coach and an athlete advocate, which will make a lot more sense once we're continuing as you hear our conversation. And he says, thankfully, God has blessed our family and businesses at levels that he never dreamed possible. And he is, I'm going to tell you that you're going to hear a story of courage, resilience, and love and humanity at its best.
Thank you.
Really excited to have you here today, Jason.
Well, excited to be here too, man.
Excited
Thanks.
to have you back as well, Sari.
Thank you, and I can't wait to hear the story.
Yeah, it's quite a story. So, where do we start? That's the hard. Oh, we have a topic of the day before.
Let's do that first.
Let's do the topic.
Yeah,
of the day.
we'll keep you on track. Don't worry about
usually I go right from the intro. We're switching it all up because of how we're structuring these shows. But there is a new documentary coming out that I just heard about today. It's called Can't Look Away, The Case Against Social Media. So my initial reaction was, social media, like LinkedIn's like the greatest thing since sliced bread.
Right.
I'm doing business that way. You know, we're all us old people are on Facebook and all that. But I also know the other side of social media, and that's what they're talking about. And that's the harm to teenagers and mental and health crisis that we have as a result of it. I'm going to actually start with Sari first, as our technology expert on our panel today.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it is a double-edged sword, but I also divide it between adults and children, right? So, from an adult perspective, right, it's almost a subversive way we can communicate. I become a huge fan of Substack, particularly now that there's been some media shutdown and some other issues. But from kids, I worry not just that it sort of gives them this unrealistic view of life, but also it's what it's doing to diminish their attention span. Right, looking at short videos and it makes it much more difficult to sit down and read a book, right? Or have a long, in-depth conversation. So, to me, that's the concern. But I think that's something we can deal with, because it's really just not putting devices into the hands of little children. Right, we shouldn't be putting iPads into a 3-year-old's hand. Yeah. We shouldn't be letting kids take their phones to school.
Jason, I don't want to answer this necessarily, but one of the things they said is They have their computers at school to do work. So,
but you can limit that, right? You can limit
right,
access on that.
yeah.
To me, it's more the personal devices.
Yeah.
And as parents, it's really our responsibility to limit those personal devices.
Well, what they're talking about, it's not just the devices themselves, it's not the technology, it's the subversiveness comes from the people that are trying to send the messages to these kids and get in their heads and create addicts out of them for information addicts. Right?
Yeah, and I think
to
both of that, I think Sari brought up a great point. I think that what it's doing to the identity of America is a bigger problem, because it's almost, you don't post something on social media because you don't want a response. You put it out there because you want that response.
You want that validation.
They want the validation.
Yeah.
You want the affirmation that what you're doing is right. And I think it's creating a false narrative in people's minds about their identity, about who they really are and where they find themselves, especially in our young children. I think adults, hopefully we surround ourselves in a circle of people that can inform who we are and our identity. But these young kids, that's what they're using it for. That's what I find my kids. I have 4 kids. And so that's my bigger concern, is that how it is impacting identity for
especially
especially the younger generation.
Yeah, but also I also think for adults, we know the political polarization in our country and in the world, and that's all because people are choosing their news sources based on what's fed to them, and which way they choose to look at the news, and therefore nobody can hear the other side of things.
But that would be really true even without social media. You just chose, are you going to listen to NPR or Fox News? Even though there was no social media, right?
It's definitely
division.
A dangerous tool out there, and I think,
it's
just the accessibility.
Yeah.
So anyway, interesting conversation.
It is.
We're doing a 2-part show, actually, I should say, for Jason, because it's a long show. So we'll start the next show with continue.
To be continued.
To be continued.
There you go.
Exactly. So Jason, so let's talk about. I think your story really starts with your education, coming out of college, deciding what you want to do. So let's start with that.
Yeah, and as you'd mentioned in my bio, it kind of starts from the age of 16 when I started working in the family business and kind of had this inkling that I wasn't sure if college was for me, but I was an athlete, and when you're an athlete and a good athlete, that's the thing you do, is you try and excel to college. So I'm working at 16 as a carpenter and things like that in the family business, and I started thinking, okay, do I want to go to school? So I did go to school. I went to college for a year and I played athletics, but to your point, Mark, the story really begins kind of when I get out of college for that year. So I went to Eastern Illinois after a junior college. I went to Eastern Illinois for a year. I was going to be playing football there, got injured, and came home. And that's where my life kind of began. And that's where the story kind of began. Met, as you said, my wife, Nettie, beautiful lady that you met, and she introduced us back at Babcock Ranch.
First of all, you can't help but meet Nettie.
Yeah, she's a vibrant character. Yeah, but yeah, when I came home from that year after injury and met her, I immediately said, you know what, I don't know that school's for me. So I decided to go to work, because that entrepreneur spirit that Sari shared in her show, it's just kind of, it bleeds out of you, and it's hard not to want to just go ahead and chase something, and achieve. So I just decided, all right, what can I do? And I said, well, I know carpentry because I did that when I was 16. So I kind of jumped into that. And had a really supportive father who started our family company 35 years ago, and I've been now with him for 33 years.
He's a true gentleman. I just had the opportunity to meet him recently.
Excellent. Yeah, he's a great dude. But yeah, so he had said to me, he said, hey, listen, he goes, the way I started was when I was 18 years old, my father passed away, and nobody gave me anything, and I had to earn it. And he said a similar story to me, and he said, but I'm going to help you get your start. So I went to him and said, I want to get into construction. And he had said that'd be a great idea, because you could really help the family businesses, which we'll get to, and you kind of shared down the road. So he gave me $10,000, said, go buy a truck and buy whatever you need. So I bought a truck, bought tools, paid my dad back in the first 6 months because I was really successful at what I was doing. And that's kind of how the story starts of how I got into the family business. And it just kind of built from there. Unfortunately, a few years later, tragedy kind of happened. And I don't know if we want to get into that now or where you want to take it, but I can keep rolling.
Keep rolling.
Okay.
I want you to tell the story the way you tell it.
Okay, beautiful. So, that 2 years goes by, and I'm working in construction and everything. And I'm doing a bigger job now, because you said the one-room remodels to the 450,000 square foot shopping centers. And it's not giant, but it's where we're remodeling an old Eagle. I don't know if anybody knows Eagle Foods. They're up in the Midwest, but we're remodeling an Eagle food store. And I'm going to make sure and be really specific to tell both the falls that I had. And I'll say falls because I had 2 accidents. I always forget the first one. Every time I tell it, my wife will be like, you had 2 falls. Because I literally, when you go through this much trauma, you literally forget these moments in your life that have happened. Maybe God protects you from, I don't know. But I don't remember the first fall, but I've been told so many times about it, I actually can now tell the story. So the first fall was the Eagle Food Store. We were taking down a concrete mezzanine, and I shared with you, Marc, when we prepped for this. Yep. And there was an expansion joint that we didn't know about. And right after lunch, before everybody was getting their harnesses on, and like Sari, I'm a really good boss, and I was out there telling everybody what to do, and I wasn't really worried about, anything except what's next and how do we get the job done. Unfortunately, the expansion joint that wasn't on the as-built drawings was behind us. We thought it was right in front of us. It was 5 feet behind us. And the sheer weight of our bodies being up there and the sections of the concrete that we had already disassembled or taken out caused that platform of concrete to shear. And it actually catapulted me as it started to flip. The front piece went under. I was standing on the very end. It catapulted me about 30 feet onto a pile of concrete. God chose to save me. There was a piece of rebar 3 feet to the right of me, a piece of rebar 2 feet. And if anybody doesn't know what rebar is, it's steel that comes up out of the concrete. Could have impaled me and killed me instantly. In that fall, I shattered both my wrists, broke both my elbows, and broke my right pelvis.
Which are no small injuries.
But recovered from those and was doing really well. At that time, we had our first child. Nettie and I had our first child, all while going through all of these traumatic surgeries and figuring out how to, navigate all that. But
since we first talked about it, I've thought about that many times. Like,
yeah.
How do you do all that? How do you manage?
Yeah, I mean, but God, that's what I say. And we just and a great family and a great wife. So. That's my first accident. And the second accident came
back to work.
Yeah, back to work and doing life and being a dad. And at this time, I'll just kind of tease out some of the things that we've done in our company. At this time, we started the construction arm that rolled into the Fidelity companies, the family companies. And since we've talked, I realized how many other companies we've founded in that time. And it's been interesting because when you're an entrepreneur and someone who just kind of creates, you just create things and you don't really think about it.
Yeah.
But we started a paving company, so we do all of our own asphalt work now. We started a landscaping company, and we do all of our own landscaping. We do all of our own snow plowing, and we do it only for our account, meaning our portfolio properties.
But you were the impetus behind a lot of it.
Yeah, and with a great dad who just encouraged the heck out of me to be like, hey, if that's something that you think can save us money, I believe in you, go do it. So we just kept creating and generating and really just to kind of keep things in-house. The way I describe it to everybody is we're vertically integrated. So it starts at the bottom with a piece of land that we develop with our development company. We build with our construction company, and we manage with our management company. And then we maintain with all of these ancillary companies that I just described to you. So we just take the money out of the left pocket, put it in the right pocket, take it out of the right pocket, and put it in the bank.
Yep, pretty amazing. So we just have a minute left before our break. Do we go to the next fall?
I think we need to wait till after the break so we can get in, because the next fall is actually the one that's kind of the life changer.
Right.
Yeah.
And the next one, that was in 2000.
No, the next fall actually happened 2 years after the first
fall.
And then it was a long journey of recovery.
Right. Okay. You know what? Let's take a break right now, and let's come back, and we'll talk about
Sounds great.
Unfortunately, the next fall. Okay, thanks.
The Great Lakes Adaptive Sports Association, GLASA, serves athletes of all ages with a primary physical or visual disability through adaptive sports programming. GLASA empowers and supports youth, adults, and injured veterans through 20-plus adaptive sports including tennis, pickleball, track and field, wheelchair basketball, sled hockey, and so much more. Serving over 1,000 athletes throughout the year, GLASA is a national leader in adaptive sports. From June 11th to the 16th, hundreds of athletes with disabilities will compete at the 2025 Great Lake Games in partnership with the Hartford in Illinois, with competitions in archery, boccia, para-powerlifting, para-triathlon, shooting, swim, and track and field. Registration is now open, and volunteer opportunities are available to help make our mission possible. To donate to GLASA or learn more, visit glasa.org.
All right, we're back on Founders Forum, and we teased you a little bit with wanting to know what happens next in regard to Jason, but there was a second fall. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So as I had mentioned previously, it was kind of 2 years after that first fall had happened, and I'll probably get the dates wrong, so we don't even need to go to that. I'm somewhere around in this time, and it's hard to remember it all. I think I'm about 23. I am 23 at that time because our first boy was just about to be born after this.
So just to put it in perspective, you're 50 today.
Yeah.
And we're going to take this show, and you'll have to wait for part 2. It's going to go out to 2013.
Yeah, because to your point, Mark, the story, it's been a journey. It's not like a moment in time of challenge. It's been a journey. So the fall was as I was building.
By the way, we're not usually focused on timelines and all that.
Yeah.
But it's kind of necessary in this case.
Yeah, no, and I'll try and just kind of tell the general story without being too focused on the time. But I fell 35 feet onto a concrete driveway. And it's important that I tell kind of how that happened because it's kind of shaped who I am, and it's shaped who I am as a business leader because that tragedy, and the reason the tragedy happened was a lot of self-pride and arrogance on my part. I'll describe it briefly. We were building a home. I've only built 2 houses in my life. One of them was for my parents, and this was the house I was building for my parents. And it was a 16,000 square foot English castle. And it had a three-story stair turret that the top of the roof was about 70 feet high. So the gutter line was at about 35 feet. So I was climbing a 40-foot extension ladder. And our roofer, who was actually up there, hadn't shown up for a week and wasn't returning my calls, and I was really angry at him. So I decided that I'm going to go up there onto that roof, and I'm going to grab him, I'm going to pull him down, and we're going to have a conversation. I mean, I just described how tall this is up there. But unfortunately, what happened is kind of running up this ladder in rage, the wind hit me in the chest and knocked me off the ladder, and I fell backwards, kind of going down backwards, my head first. I kind of flipped my body around, but I landed with my left foot touching my right shoulder behind my back, both my arms behind my back, which caused both my collarbones to come out of my skin and broke both my wrists again, and shattered my left pelvis, broke my spine in 9 to 10 places, bit down so hard that I knocked out 10 of my teeth. My orbital bone was coming through the roof of my mouth. Enough gore for the show because that's not the focus. But that's what caused me kind of to just go on this long journey. You know, I'm 25 years old now. I think, I was 25. 23 first fall, 25 second fall. And it's been now a 25-year journey there wasn't a year that went by in my life for 20 years that I didn't have multiple surgeries in recovery from this.
Right. How many surgeries total?
54 surgeries in my life. Yeah, 54 surgeries. Yeah.
So then what happened?
Yeah, so, you know, and I'm going through this fall, and as a entrepreneur and a business leader, and, you know, kind of like key component of the family business, I never really took any time off. I just kind of kept working through this process as we're continuing to have all these surgeries, having more kids. We, you know, had 3 more kids through this whole process. You know, and it's interesting because, you know, everybody thinks like you have this fall and it's like initially there's a lot of trauma, obviously. And you go through like an initial couple year period where you have a whole bunch of surgeries and to get back to health, a whole bunch of time in the hospital, you know, and then it's like just kind of like a slow burn. It's almost like an ice cube melting where your body just continues to deteriorate because of
But after this, I know your body was starting to deteriorate, but you were pretty functional.
I was, yeah. I was completely able-bodied. I was walking on my own. Had a lot of pain. Couldn't run. You know, couldn't really like jump or do any of those things. But I was coaching youth football. I was coaching high school football. Very active still. I really. had kind of given up all athletics at that point, which was, really hard for me because I was an athlete my whole life, 3-sport athlete in high school, was hoping to play Division I college athletics. But I was able-bodied, and, now we have 4 kids, so sports really weren't even a thing because you're just chasing kids everywhere and doing all that.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I and the way, like I said, I describe it as that kind of the slow burn or the ice cube melting is, unfortunately, my body would just keep giving out. So every year, whether it was another back surgery, because I had 2 or 3 initially when the accident, I'd have another back surgery, I'd have another wrist surgery, and I just kind of constantly having all these surgeries, which just added up time, over time, while still running, with my dad, the family businesses, and building more and developing more, and and kind of just that achiever in both of us never really, I wouldn't let anything really get in the way. I think because I was struggling so much personally with my health that I needed to achieve something to make sure that I was, that was what I built kind of my persona on. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I know we're going to wait till the next show for 2013 on, but we still have a little bit of time. So where did you find yourself as a result of this deterioration of your body, I guess is the question.
Yeah, no, and I was doing well, but it's just it's hard, and that's what I mean. I describe it as it's really tough, man, to continue leading a business, leading a family, and continuing to have just constant trauma, constant surgeries. It's like I would have 3 or 4 months of feeling good, and I would always tell my wife, I don't actually want to feel good, and she would say, why? And I'm like, because when you feel good or don't have a ton of pain or something isn't failing, you know what it's like. And I never got to experience that for very long because then something else would go wrong and I'd have to, and a lot of this, to be honest, was kind of self-inflicted because I'm still continuing to push myself with this drive, this internal drive to, all right, well, we need a paving company. Let's create a paving company.
Maybe still a little arrogance. Or
a little bit of that achiever mentality, and being an entrepreneur and being driven is awesome, right? When it's monitored, when it's held in check, because it can get you in trouble if not. And I think some of my story is absolutely part of that, right? Is that without being held in check or without having kind of a barometer to say enough's enough, it can get a little bit out of control.
I think that lack of balance is really such a common trait
to
entrepreneurs and needing to have others in your life or something else in your life, right? That says, okay, here's your other focus area.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Sari. I think you need to have those people that are going to kind of hold you in check, kind of have guardrails like you described in your show, talking about guide rails for AI. Like as entrepreneurs, we need to have guardrails. Because we can continue just starting stuff and doing stuff over and over and over when it's like, wait a minute, some of this stuff may not be healthy for us to go and do.
And I think it's also having other interests, things that you're not that good at that you have to focus at. For me, it was sailing. My husband's a natural sailor. I'm not. So when I was sailing, I had to be 100% focused on that, not multitasking, not doing anything else, and knowing that you're not always good at stuff.
Yeah, it's good.
So put that all together, basically what was happening was you were in a lot of pain, but you were focused on what you were doing, try to keep just going on. Did you have any emotional reaction to all this? Were you feeling it emotionally yet in terms of what was going on?
I mean, that comes a little bit later, I think, when we get to the, after 2013, but through the whole thing, I think thank God, and I say but God, because without our church family through, this whole 25-year process, and we've got some really good friends that have been with us through the whole thing, and they've seen they've seen the good and the bad. They've seen what I describe the dark night of the soul. I've had some of those where it's just, you've had those moments where it's like, I'm not sure I can continue living through all of this. 54 surgeries. I can't tell you the count of some days and nights in the hospital. And, I look back on it now and I just go, as the patient, it's actually easier. As the patient, it's actually easier. I don't know what my family had to go through. And that's tough, man. To know that my wife had to sit there all those days and nights that I was unconscious after surgery, my kids, and now that they're older and we've had a chance to kind of reconcile all that. But yeah, to bring to your point, there's a lot of struggle.
To be a ton of stress on the family.
Yeah, ton of stress on the whole family, a ton of stress on times on the business,
I'm sure.
Some of the craziest things that happen in those moments is, it's like as you own your own business, like you're worried about all this insurance stuff that's going on, and how do you get, do I take the disability? Do I not? It's like, it's just weird stuff that you don't want to have to worry about.
So we talk a lot on the show about challenges.
Yeah.
We talked about it with Sari. We talk about it with everyone that comes on here, and every entrepreneur has them. These are not the ones you expect, though. These are
right.
These are things that happen related to the business, because they were both
right.
business-related accidents, but they were physical and emotional things that outside of the business that obviously affected the business, affected your family,
Yep.
affected you. And it's a remarkable journey. I mean, I don't want to give away any of the ending of the story, but you are in a wheelchair today.
Yeah.
And you carry on with a lot of things, and we'll get to talk about all that.
Yeah.
To me, I told you at the beginning, this is a story I told the audience, is a story about resilience, and it really is. And I know we're going to get to the hard part in part 2, but it really is a remarkable story when you look at the whole thing. And I know you know this because you're helping a lot of people, that you're a role model.
Well, thank you.
For others, and an inspiration, I think, to all entrepreneurs, because when you think of the challenges that we have, nobody's really had, not nobody, I'm sure there are
Sure.
people, but it's not typical that you have to deal with all these other challenges on top of that.
And that's a great point to say, on top of that, because I can remember, through all of this, while we're dealing with all of my physical challenges as a family, and when you have a family business, as most entrepreneurs know, when there's a family business involved, it's everybody involved. I mean, and it's just my father and I and my mom, and then my family that's involved in the business. But to that point, we've had all of our bank challenges being in the real estate business. We were in business in 2008 when right. things happened and the whole market kind of crashed, and so we've lived through all of those financial challenges. Then you put on top all of the physical challenges that we had to deal with, with one of the owners at the time, and one of the main key people in the operation of the company. It really creates a lot of tension and hardship.
I'm sure, and we haven't even talked that much about that, but I'm sure they exist, because I thought about that.
Yeah.
The construction business over the last 25 years
right.
is not a smooth ride itself. So we're just about at the end of part 1. I do want to ask you one, we always have fun questions
Sure.
at the end. Your favorite sports, because we'll relate back to that later on, but tell us what you like to play.
Currently, I'm a big-time golfer, so I'm a seated golfer. I have
to the audience, that's how I heard about him first, not even
right.
knowing who's my next-door neighbor.
Yeah.
Everyone says, you got to see this guy, Jason.
Yeah, so I have a cart that stands me up, and I golf, and I'm blessed enough to compete nationally and shoot pretty much in the high 70s every time I play the game, and play pickleball in a wheelchair, and
right.
going to be competing in the U.S. Open down in Naples here in the first week of May, and competing in international field.
That's unbelievable.
That's amazing.
That's unbelievable.
I've been watching you, because
yeah.
my home's right on the 11th green,
So
and I watch you out there. Yeah.
Oh, how about that?
See me rolling by.
Yeah.
You knew Jason without knowing him.
Yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
So listen, that's a great jumping off point. We can end on a up note before we get into the rest of the story on part 2. So please listen next week, and you'll hear Jason Sfire part 2 of this story on Founders Forum. Thank you all for listening today, and have a great one.
We hope you enjoyed your time with Founders Forum and that you found value to take with you throughout your day. Join us again next week for another episode of Founders Forum on WXKB 1039 HD2. Sponsored by Marc J. Bernstein. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the views of this station, its management, or Beasley Media Group.